morning, everyone. I keep forgetting to mention, and so I'll mention now, you can download me on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on all of those apps as well, just in case you can't find me on YouTube. I've had some reports that YouTube is blocking or censoring me or losing me in the search in favor of Global News or some other places. So I just wanted to point out that if you want me delivered right to your device, this actually works, whereas YouTube sometimes does not. Okay, moving into the news. Global News is reporting Parliament adopts COVID-19 wage subsidy bill. This was debated yesterday. This has been a hot topic of debate because, well, the Liberals tried to pass this once already. It was debated once in the House. It was passed in an emergency session in the House, but the Liberals couldn't deliver what they promised via press conference, so they had to bring everybody back again and have some more debate and pass this even bigger subsidy program package. I'm going to show you some of the debate between Pierre Poilievre. I'm going to talk about, well, there's lots we're going to get to. But this is the biggest news in Canada right now. So this is Easter weekend. Happy Easter. Good morning. I hope you've done your chocolate egg hunt. And, buckle up. Here we go. Parliament has approved a massive $73 billion wage subsidy program aimed at helping businesses and workers survive the economic ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic. A bill to implement what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the most significant economic program since the Second World War was passed Saturday by the Commons on division after some 6 hours of speeches and debate. On division means there was some opposition among the handful of MPs in the chamber, but there was no recorded vote. It was not immediately clear who objected. But sources in other parties who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak about confidential behind-the-scenes negotiations suggest the Conservatives insisted on the final vote being on division as part of an agreement to let the bill sail through the Commons in a matter of hours. In the Senate later, it was Conservative Senate Leader Don Plett who called for the bill to be passed by the chamber on division as well. It received royal assent late Saturday night. Plett accused the government of, quote, being asleep at the wheel and doing too little too late throughout the crisis, and asserted that by consistently fumbling its management of the health crisis, the government has led the country straight into an economic crisis. Mr. Plett, well said. Honestly, that says in a couple of sentences what I take 20 minutes to say. Well done, sir. Back to this. Plett also took a sharp jab at Trudeau, who went into self-isolation at his home, Rideau College, after his wife fell ill with COVID-19. Quote, essential workers get up every day and leave the safety of their home to serve their country. Perhaps the Prime Minister should have done the same and gone into the office to pick up the phone and properly consult with Canadians, instead of choosing to stay at his cottage long after his 14-day isolation had ended, Plett told the Senate. That immediately made me think of this Andy gif. So there it is. Right? Throwing shade at Trudeau. I liked it. Okay, back to this. Despite the Conservatives' apparent lingering misgivings about the content of the bill, they agreed to allow it to pass quickly and drop their previous attempt to tie the bill to the longer-term question of how Parliament should function in the midst of the crisis. I scroll down. The bill authorizes the federal government to pay companies 75% of the first $58,700 earned by each employee, up to $847 per week for up to 12 weeks. The subsidy is retroactive to March 15th and will be available to companies that lost 15% of their revenue in March or 30% in April or May. Finance Minister Bill Morneau said the money will begin to flow within 2 to 5 weeks, with the government working to get it started in the shortest possible time. And I mean, that's not nearly good enough. This thing's been running for a month already, right? Like, this thing was really, really kicking off on the 11th and 12th of March. The government said this is going to get worse before it gets better. So we're on a month that they've known about this. We're on a month, or 3 weeks anyway, where we've been on full lockdown, right? Like, and the plan is, just stay on lockdown until July, and then maybe we can start to open some things. I don't think that's a plan at all. It's really, really, really insulting that that's the current plan. Here is CBC reporting Canadian Military Intelligence Unit issued warning about Wuhan outbreak back in January. Now, the reason I'm showing you this, I reported on this yesterday, but this is a comprehensive article. It's referenced here in Mr. Poilievre's question, but it's interesting because his question gets cut off by the CBC, and I'll show you here. Hold on. Okay, here's the CBC running this content.
Fort Carlton. Thank you. Yes or no question, the military intelligence warned of the deadly coronavirus in a briefing to the government in early January. Yes,
Okay, we are going to pull away now from this question and answer session between a limited number of MPs, parliamentarians.
Really, Rosemary? Right then? I mean, I would want to hear the answer to that question. I'm sure you do too. Here's okay, that's 10 minutes of Pierre Poilievre. Here's the 2 minutes. Yes or no question.
Intelligence warned of the deadly coronavirus in a briefing to the government in early January. Yes or no, did the Prime Minister, his office, or any member of the cabinet see these briefings? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada, as a member of the Five Eyes, as a member of NATO, as a member of NORAD, a close intelligence partner with all of those allies, very much including the United States, is privy to a great deal of intelligence. Of course, the global pandemic is an issue which has concerned our intelligence agencies and those of our partners, so we have been in close communication with them.
Well, member for Carleton.
Did any member of the cabinet see that intelligence from our military? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
As I have said, Mr. Speaker, our intelligence sharing is very important. Our intelligence sharing with our allies during this global pandemic, which poses particularly security challenges, has been, I would say, very energetic, and we continue to work with.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Question was and is, did any member of the cabinet see that military intelligence? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, part of the basis on which we are able to work closely with our partners, including when it comes to sharing intelligence, is sharing with Canadians only what we are able to do.
Carleton.
We know that the intelligence exists, and we know that the military warned the government of the dangers of the coronavirus in early January. After January 22nd, how many people did this government allow into Canada from the Hubei province, the province from which the virus originated? How many?
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to border controls, our government is very aware of the importance of ensuring that people coming into the country today are subject to mandatory.
I think that it's interesting that she went towards the mandatory quarantines today. The question was, since January 22nd, after January 22nd, how many people from the Hubei province? And I forgot how to spell it, so that's why I went with Wuhan region of China. But I know it starts with an H-U-I. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's like Huawei. I always get the A and the U mixed up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, he's asking a specific question, and they have the answer to that. There's the air record. I mean, I could find the answer to that if given enough time, and I don't have that time right now, but I could. And she goes off to say, well, we work closely with people, and goes off in the direction of now they have 14-day quarantines, but not in January they didn't, and not until the Quarantine Act was enacted a few weeks ago, or last week. I think it was at the end of March. But again, they're slow in action. Their inaction has directly led us from a health calamity to an economic catastrophe. And that is absolutely intolerable in this government. I can't believe that there's not a confidence vote, because this government is not capable of handling this. From the misinformation and outright lies coming from Tam and Haidu to the Prime Minister's inaction on pretty much everything, the border, the right advice, hydroxychloroquine, right? I mean, this is all very problematic, and we're going to get into the rest of the debate. Here's Mr. Poilievre going into, well, I'm going to show a couple of clips from this. I hope it's loud enough. I'm just going to show a couple of clips, and I think the analogies he uses are excellent. He talks about the fact that 75% wages from nothing are nothing, right? Like if your company is not bringing in any money at all, then there's not a whole lot that you can do with the subsidy, because no money, 75% of nothing is nothing. And I'm glad other people are making that point, right? Like Mr. Poilievre puts it well. So here we go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Once upon a time, an angry dog chased a cat, and the cat ran up to the top of the tree. And so the cat lived
happily ever thereafter. Right? Well, wrong, because of course the cat had to come down the tree at some point and the dog was still waiting there. We're in the same situation as Dr. Fisman, an epidemiologist from whom I borrowed that analogy, explained. We're all safely in our homes, away from the COVID dog. But at some point, we will have to come out into the world if we're going to earn a living and pay our bills. That is ultimately the problem with which we will be faced in the medium term. Today we are debating measures, for example, that are at once too exorbitant and too inadequate. And how is that possible? Well, they are too exorbitant because they will drive our deficit to at least $186 billion this year, almost 4 times the previous record. That's only to pay for measures that take us to the end of the summer, barely a fiscal quarter into the year. Doesn't include provincial deficits or the reduction in the book value of the Canada Pension Plan investments, which surely will have dropped given that markets are down by 1/3 since the crisis began. And that's why I'll be sharing my time with the member for Kelowna.
So he puts it pretty well there. Like, there are future impacts, there are short-term impacts. It's not nearly enough, and it's far too much, right? And he makes his case on all of those levels. He's a very good speaker, and he much better than me, and he puts it well. And I'm gonna cue up the next little bit. Hold on. Okay, he's been talking about kind of stories tying the first part of the speech to real life, and now he's going back to the cat at the top of the tree analogy and explaining kind of what's next. And this is what I've been talking about. Leadership talks about where we're going, right? So far, our leadership has been very reactionary. They have not been ahead of this, not once. They've been telling us they've been ahead of this while simultaneously ignoring it while it's spread, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now we need an actual plan. And as I've said, the plan to cower in our houses for 2 years is not a realistic plan. Mr. Poilievre puts it better than I do. Here we go.
So we are still the cat at the top of the tree. And it's true, we have to hide there because there is this dog at the bottom of the tree waiting for us when we get down. But we do need a plan to get down. Now, health experts tell us that the only way to get rid of the COVID dog is to have a vaccination or a cure, but that might not happen for as long as 1.5 years. I've already explained that we're going to go $186 billion into deficit simply to respond in 1/4 of 1 year. You can do the math. This cannot go on, at least in its current state, for that length of time. So we need an interim plan to get out of the tree safely and back to life so we can resupply our economy and can produce the wealth that we continue to consume. So what is that interim plan? Well, we can only study those places that have found ways to make it work. So far, the exemplary cases are South Korea and Taiwan. And what have they done? Well, in South Korea, they've begun very well-targeted testing to find out who is susceptible to who's actually contracted the disease and therefore spreading it. And once those people are identified, they are quickly isolated and treated. Here in Canada, we've tested about 1% of the Canadian population in 6 weeks. That is far too slow.
So even Mr. Poilievre is on the train for pushing for more testing and then isolation of people who test positive. I still think this is the wrong direction to go in due to the fact that we have a cure that looks to be working pretty well. And I'm going to move on from Mr. Poilievre and the passage of the $73 million package. There are massive holes in it. I think that it's flawed. And I think that I don't think that it'll do necessarily what the Liberals want it to do. I think that the Liberals and the government need to focus on a plan that gets us back to work as soon as possible, regardless of, safely, right? Like Mr. Poilievre said, coming out of the tree safely is the goal, and you can't be reckless, but you need to look at what is actually happening on the ground and not at the models now. You know, like there's There's a lot wrong with a response that relies 100% on modeling and zero on what's happening on the ground. I've seen, and I posted a Twitter thread yesterday from a doctor in Guelph talking about how he's got an ICU of 21 beds and 4 patients in it. And he said, this is unheard of. He said, like, what's happening, basically? And I retweeted it and said, what's happening? This is not the only one that I've heard like this. Like, I've heard a lot. I showed the conga line yesterday, right? It seems odd to be hearing one thing and experiencing another, right? But that's been the hallmark of the 2020s, been the hallmark of the last few years anyway, with the Trudeau government at the helm. Here is James Tedoro, MD, and he says, Washington Kirkland Nursing Home, no hydroxychloroquine, 35 deaths out of 120 residents. Texas Nursing Home, treatment with hydroxychloroquine. 1 death out of 135 residents, right? And I found on Reddit, and I've got the link to the original Reddit post here right at the top, but this is a Reddit post saying how hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin stop COVID-2 from killing you, and why some people don't want you to know that. So I just republished, or I just like backed this up here, just for your reading pleasure. I'm not a doctor. This person's not a doctor. Take it with a grain of salt, and don't follow that advice without consulting a doctor. But it's something to know. It's something to be aware of. There are people who are talking about this, and there are well-respected people backing it up. It's interesting that while we are testing in Calgary for hydroxychloroquine, how it works, how its efficacy, they're still not allowing it to be prescribed broadly because the testing is not done. And I have a link for that. Give me a second. It was University of Alberta. Anyway, it doesn't matter. University of Alberta researchers studying effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine, not NEEC, against COVID-19, and this is 15 hours ago, right? So Canadians are looking at this. It just seems too slow, especially when they want to push the best case scenario being July, or it seems like not nearly good enough a plan. Here's CTV News reporting, as Wuhan emerges from lockdown, residents line up to bury their dead. This is not about Wuhan emerging from lockdown. It's about residents lining up to bury their dead. So there's a lot of videos on social media recently about lineups around the corner, like around the funeral home, waiting to get urns and all that stuff to bury their dead. That's what this article is about. It doesn't talk really about emerging from lockdown. And this is my tool to see if Wuhan is back to normal, okay? And back to normal, you would see kind of traffic at maybe normal levels, like 2019 levels. 2019 levels is the little blue light line. The red line is live congestion. So, and you can look at the last 7 days, right? Here they are. And I mean, it's Easter weekend, but I don't know that Easter weekend is widely celebrated. And I could be wrong, but I don't think that Easter weekend is widely celebrated in this part of China. Do correct me in the comments if I'm incorrect. But it seems like, while traffic is down quite a lot, it seems like Wuhan is not back to normal, despite the news. And I'm sure that if I looked, I could find an article every week for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I was talking with somebody like at the middle of March, probably the 17th or 18th of March, who was saying, oh yeah, Wuhan's getting back to normal now. And I was like, where do you see that? That's not even close to possible, right? Like traffic is not anywhere near. Like average conditions in 2019, 42%, 18% on April 10th, right? Same thing here, 46%, and it's 6%, right? 46% in 2019, 6% now, right? So it seems disingenuous to report things that are maybe not easily provable, but there's indications out there that show that maybe not so much, right? Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful Easter. Enjoy it. I hope you get lots and lots of chocolate.